by the Department of Revenue, the date for citizens and businesses to pay their property taxes in Florida has been extended from March 31st to April 15th. Those payments will be submitted electronically by April 15th, and they will be considered timely payments. I'm working on an additional extension, but this is what we have thus far. Also, we're working to get the Department of State, to extend the annual report filing, and by that, the executive order that the timely requirement for businesses to file an annual report has been extended to June 30th. That's a 2-month extension, and any for-profit corporation, LLC, LP, or LLP will have until July 1, 12:01 a.m. before they're assessed a $400 late fee. Also, the Department of Economic Opportunity, as you can imagine, at the direction of Governor DeSantis, has announced the waiving of the requirement to wait a week to receive reemployment assistance benefits through May 8th. This system is taxed, as you might imagine right now. They went from having 300 to 400 calls a day to 22,000. They are doubling down efforts and expanding that system as well. Keith, I'd love to chat a little bit about the budget and where we were with on March 19th, the last day of session, when we signed House Bill 5001, which was our General Appropriations Act. I'd love to tell you a little bit about how.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great, Chip. Please keep it up. Thanks.
Okay. One of the things I want to talk about is that before we left session, we were actually in the beginning of the coronavirus epidemic, and we set aside $53.5 million in this act to deal with immediate drawdown prior to the federal funds being awarded to the state of Florida. We also put roughly $300 million out of the tax package aside for the coronavirus epidemic. With respect to what's important to Broward County, our friends in the cultural world will be very happy to find out we had almost 1.3 million in cultural funding. Due to some important legislation last year and this year, we passed telehealth last year, which has become a very important resource and tool in the healthcare industry, especially with what is going on now. In 2020, this year, we passed something called the Advanced Practice Registered Nurse Scope, and that's going to allow our doctors to get a lot of help from our nurses in some other areas that they traditionally were not able to do. The biggest things for me in dealing with the budget, Keith, and everyone really, is our environment, education, and our economy. And they continue to be these overwhelming issues. And I think the Florida House and the Florida Senate has prepared us, as I hope, for both the economic side. I know that Superintendent Runcie will speak later, but was proud to vote for and support a $500 million increase in teacher salary allocation for the FEFP, as well as some other very important issues in education. Our own school board member, Lori Alladef, was very helpful with a couple of the other Broward reps and myself, as we co-sponsored Alyssa's Law, which will be a security alert system for all the classrooms, which we know that's very important to our community. So some important things in education. I mentioned the coronavirus response. The overall budget, folks, was $93.2 billion for the statewide budget, which also included a $4 billion reserve and more than $60 million for the ongoing, as I mentioned, coronavirus. That $4 billion reserve may be the subject of why we go back to Tallahassee to deal with some of these issues, or at least have probably one of these virtual meetings with our legislators. Also important in funding is environmental protection. We saw last year's dollar amount and increased it to $690 million in environmental funding, 76.6 for stormwater and wastewater treatment, 50 million in springs restoration, and $100 million in Florida Forever, which is the conservation of lands throughout our state. We saw 13 million for small county wastewater grants, quite a few other areas of our environment that were funded. One of my personal pet projects for many years was our beaches, and that is now going to be a recurring fund of $50 million per year. Finally, one of the probably most important issues to the Broward Workshop and to Broward County has been our Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Proud to sit here today, and hopefully this will remain as it is. I couldn't commit to this when we last met at a Broward Workshop meeting, but I said I would work hard with the other members. We fully funded the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund, in addition to the SHIP Fund and the SAIL Fund, which are also Affordable Housing Trust dollars. The fund was fully funded at $370 million this year. And we are hopefully blessed by those dollars to deal with a lot of the things that we're going to be seeing with our employees and colleagues and friends dealing with our economy that has changed. I would also add that we had substantial funding for ongoing hurricane issues, $1.7 billion for ongoing storm response. And I would ask all of those there, I'm happy to take any questions before the senator gets on, but I would ask all those there to be as creative as you can to support our restaurants, our hospitality industry, and eat out as much as you want, just have it brought to your house.
Thanks, Jeb. Give us a little bit more of your gut feeling and insight about budget, because we're so dependent on state sales tax, and most of us are hunkered down and spending a lot less. I know there's some federal money that's coming our way, several $billion. How do you see that breaking out?
Keith, I want to again thank everybody in this call who has been driving our economy, because prior to this outbreak, the months of January and February, even into March, the financial forecasters in Tallahassee had us $48 million over, which means in the green for those first 3 months. So we had a little bit of headwind coming into this crisis. So I think we have a little bit of help, but I'm going to let the folks of the chamber and other organizations kind of hit a little bit of that. But from the legislative side, I strongly suspect we'll be going back in some form or fashion to deal with budget issues. But I think the responsibility and the way that we've saved and put into reserves over the last 7-8 years certainly has been through this economy as it's been building. It will be a help. We're going to have to dig into that, I believe, and we're going to be able to get through this. We'll be all right. We just need to continue to do the good things we're doing here in Broward County.
Yeah, I think that's great. And we have to look back at our state leaders' fiscal leadership of building reserves and balancing the budget to be so important in times like this. But I was just thinking on personal use. I saw yesterday where wine sales are up 65%. So, and we're doing our share at the Koenig household. Kelly and I are doing our share at the Koenig household. But maybe Total Wine can help offset some of the deficits on other areas. Talk to us a little bit about the environmental. This was so important. And what were the major results of the last legislative session there that you're proud of?
Well, our entire ag and natural resource budget being environmental makes me very proud to be in the leadership or in the legislature right now. And I would tell you that I'm finally at the point where I can say that, you know what, it's not a right or left issue. It's not a Republican, Democrat. It's our environment. We've got to protect it, and we've got to make sure that we invest. So we did $390 million, as I mentioned, in Everglades restoration and water projects. A couple other numbers I didn't cover prior. We had $50 million in targeted water quality improvements, 77 for local water projects, 40 million for alternative water supply, 37 million to combat algae blooms. And I'd mentioned the beaches, but really at this point in time, us dealing with sea level rise, us dealing with water quality, water supply, those issues, I think everyone's on the same page. We didn't see any real fights about the environment this year. We had a great leader in the Florida House, and Holly Rothschein from Key West, who really understands why the environment's important to the economy of Florida. So, you know, that was a big area. And then also Health and Human Services. We spent we're going to be spending quite a bit this year, $330 million in safety net hospitals and another 81.8 to fight the opioid crisis. So definitely trying to make sure that we have the dollars set aside. And to your point about fiscal responsibility, it's kind of like infrastructure. It's not always sexy, but when you need it, it's the most important thing in the world.
Yeah, I can tell you on the business front too. We've always tried to run our business conservatively financially, and I'm kind of proud of that because we got some staying power. But let's transition that environment issue. A big one for the Broward workshop and for everybody in South Florida is the economics of resiliency. Mm-hmm. So the economics are different than, put the science away, but the economics. So when we get into this year, what the business community is really asking for is, give us a plan, and we're working towards doing that. Hopefully the state legislature is going to help assist in coming up with an overall comprehensive plan, the funding for the plan that we can put into place over the next decade or two to turn the tide, so to speak, in terms of the economics of resiliency. Maybe speak to that for a moment.
Yeah, it's a great point, Keith. One of the things that I will be rolling out next year and trying to get a lot of our local engineering and science leaders behind is I see that we have sea level issues and rising tides, coastal flooding. I joined an organization called the American Flood Coalition that Alec Bogdanoff is involved with, and some other legislators have joined, Dems and Republicans, House, Senate, all over the country. And one of the issues that's important, we want to go to a plan that will look at whether it's seawalls, sea level issues affecting our infrastructure. How do we deal with that on a statewide level? I'll share more of that plan, but I feel this is really an improvement district type thing that would be all around the state of Florida. We all have to pay whether we're on the water or not on the water, because when that water comes in, it's going to damage all the properties. So that's one of the issues that we're working on. I'll be proud to move that forward.
Hey, Chip, Representative Chip LaMarca, thank you very much for that. We are now proud to have our U.S. Senator, Marco Rubio. Marco, welcome to Broward Workshop's State of the County Forum, and we are delighted that you're here speaking with us today in very unique circumstances. Our meeting for the first time is virtual, as you can easily understand. Please give us an update about what you see happening on the federal level and the CARES Act, and what issues you think we should be paying attention to.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Hello?
All right, hello.
All right, there we go.
I love this. I love this technology.
All right, got it.
Marco, we lost you for a second. Marco, I'm afraid.
All right, we'll try it again.
All right, there you are.
All right, here we go. Well, let me be fast in case they cut me again. So,
you're good. You're good. We got all the time in the world. Where are you calling from, Marco? Where are you? Are you home?
I'm in West Miami. Yeah, I'm here in South Florida.
All right, welcome back to South Florida.
We're all supposed to be staying home, right? So
we're all home. We're all hunkered down.
So a couple things. Let me first talk about the part that I've been most engaged in, which is getting this small business portion of the CARES Act going, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan, or Paycheck Protection Program. And there are two things that I want to point out about it. The first is obviously implementation is always a real challenge, and so we've been focused on that over the last week. This bill passed on Friday, and they got to work on it right away. And so they've been writing regulations, and I think there's been some back and forth with the banking industry a little bit about the complexity of some of the rules that the SBA came out with. Treasury's been great. There was some issues with SBA on the rulemaking. So they worked all night, Thursday night into Friday. And I think the new forms and docs should be available this morning if they weren't overnight. And I'm going to check on that as soon as I finish here. So I think I ask everyone for a little bit of patience about this program. I know times are tough. We have designed this massive program to help 50, 60 million small businesses in this country. And having put that together in 6 days is after passing a bill is a real task. That said, the program will be up and running. If not, at some point today, I'm hoping. And here is how it will work. The way it works is you will go, if you're a small business that qualifies, small business, 501c3, or under 500 employees, small business under 500 employees, or independent contractors, will be able to go to a lending institution or a bank, a financial institution or a bank, and they're gonna confirm your existence in the case of a 501c3 or a business, that you're actually a business concern with all the proper documentation. And that's the reason why I think it's ideal to use your existing banking relationship if they're doing this program, because they're confirming you is only going to require that they verify the information you would verify when you open a business account for someone. Nothing more extensive than that. And if they've already done it, then that box is already checked. The second thing is they will look at what is your monthly average monthly payroll before the crisis on or about February 15th, or the month of February. They will look at that number. And again, if it's your existing banking relationship or you have your operating account, that won't be hard either, especially if you're using their payroll system. A lot of small businesses use the payroll process that's provided by their banker. That's it. Those are the two boxes they have to check. And that's not what the forms that the SBA put out a couple of days ago reflected. So those are the changes that are being made. That's how I know that's the intent of the legislation, because I wrote it and I negotiated it. So I know exactly what
And
the
we
intent
appreciate
was.
that.
Yeah, but I'm saying when you get into this conversation with the regulators, they start interpreting the statute. I said, listen, there's nothing to interpret here. I wrote it. I can tell you what the intent was. So hopefully we've made big progress there. We'll find out as soon as I get off this call. But in any event, you will get 250% of your payroll. And as long as you spend that money on payroll, benefits for your employee, rent or lease or utilities, it will be 100% forgivable. If you spend any portion of it on something other than those uses, then a year from now, when the books close on the grant, it will whatever portion was spent on something outside of those things I just mentioned will convert into a 2-year loan at 1%. So the intent with that, of course, is that to create a little bit of an incentive to make sure that all the money is being spent on the employers and on the employees and on payroll. So that's the gist of the program. And now the banks looked at the documents that came out 2 days ago and said, well, that's not as simple as you said it was. That we're going to have to ask for this, for that, for the other. So I talked to Steve Mnuchin probably 8 times in the last 24 hours. He jumped all over it to fix it on the SBA side. And I'm hoping that that's what happened overnight, and the new documents and rules on the lender side have been simplified so that lenders that I know want to participate can participate. Beyond that, I would just add 2 more points. The first is, we've all heard about the crush on our unemployment system here in the state. That was a pre-existing issue. Truthfully, no state in the country is set up for to handle the sort of volume of people that are coming in. I hope that can be fixed, but ideally, if we can get the Paycheck Protection Program going, you'll have less people going to the unemployment system because their job will still be paying them, or even if they're not working in many cases. So that's the goal and the hope there. When all this passes, we're going to have to come back and do one of 2 things, or maybe both. We're going to have to probably replenish both the PPP and some of the other funding that's been made available if this thing goes much longer than the end of April, which it appears it will. At least in some parts of the country. So we're going to have to come back somehow and replenish it. So that's why we're so hopeful that we can get this program working, because then if it starts to run out of money, we can just backfill it. And then long term, we're going to have to invest some money in recovery. But of course, as we all know, as veterans of storms, you can't start the recovery until the storm has passed. And then you have to do a damage assessment. And I think the damage assessment here is going to be historic and unprecedented. So there's already some thought being given into what a recovery plan would look like. I think the next 25, 28 days in the state are going to be difficult. All the models that we look at every morning from the CDC indicate that. Obviously, models, they fluctuate from day to day, but they all show the same thing, and that is that, if we continue on the path we're on right now, doing the things that we're doing, you're going to see sort of the hospitalization and infection rate continue to climb for a number of days. That is as much as anything else a product of more testing. Everybody asks for more tests. The more you test, the more cases you're going to find. And then a peak at some point in the early part of May before it begins to drop. So it'll look like a V if we keep doing what we're doing and everybody does their part. And obviously, our goal, the most important part of this is there's a line that goes right through the middle of this graph. And that line represents the capacity of our hospitals with ICU beds and ventilators. And if that line, it's not so much the spike, obviously the spike is troubling because those are human beings and that's real suffering. But when that spike gets above the capacity line, that's where the lights go off, and that's what you're concerned about. And so I think our hospitals, under difficult circumstances all across the state, but especially in Southeast Florida, have done a phenomenal job of using this time to create capacity. But we've got to do our part to make sure that they don't get overrun. What those hospitals look like in 14, 15 days will depend on what everybody on this call and everybody we influence does today. In essence, this is a disease that manifests itself through hospitalization 14 to 21 days after initial infection. You don't just get infected on Monday and wind up in the hospital on Tuesday. It's a lag time. So today we're seeing the result of 2 weeks ago. What we do today and what we do tomorrow is going to decide what these hospitals look like in 2 or 3 weeks. And so again, I encourage everyone to keep doing what we're doing. I know it's hard, And I know it's inconvenient, but.
Senator Rubio, it seems to me, just driving around and being out a little bit, very little, it seems like Floridians are getting it. What's your take on that?
I think so, for the most part. I think that's right. Obviously, look, there are still people out there working. You know, God bless the people at Publix and the people at Winn-Dixie and the people, you know, working at CVS and Walgreens. And of course, all those that are every single day at these hospitals, because people are still having heart attacks, unfortunately. People are still having strokes. So, you know, we still have to have people are still having babies. So you still have to be at the hospital, right? And doctors and those are on the front line every single day, and they're exposing themselves. You don't know what's going to walk you through the door. And even the folks that are working at behind the cashier register, I mean, at Home Depot, for that matter. I can tell you that I do people are helping, and you can see it in the traffic patterns. But I just think we have to keep reminding people why this is important, you know, and why it is that these measures are being taken. This is a disease that spreads, as any infectious disease does, generally from one person to another. And so the less contact people have with other people, at least in person, the slower the pace of this disease. We're not going to eradicate this disease until we have a vaccine. What we can control is how many people get infected, how fast. And what you don't want is a bunch of people infected at the same time, because there's no nation on earth that has enough ventilators or hospitals for a mass infection of this type. So I do think people are following, but it's tough. You know, it's really hard. I mean, today is rent day for a lot of people. Yesterday, about 2-3 days ago, Friday. And I know it's tough, and it's a real difficult situation for a lot of people, you know, so obviously we're trying to do what we can to be helpful.
Well, I think the federal government has thrown everything at it, $2+ trillion so far, a real demand spurt with the $1,200 per person coming out. So I think I just want to thank you and everybody on both sides of the aisle that work together to make this happen. And thanks for being with us today. For everybody at Broward Workshop, no.
Hi, this is Diana, Governor DeSantis' office.
Questions that we didn't get to. When we get to the, you spoke to affordable housing, and the first time that we got Sadowski funds avoiding getting swept in. Oh, Chip, are you there?
Yeah, you kept getting muted. Sorry about that, Keith. I can hear you now. You're muted again.
Yeah, now you can go ahead.
There we go.
Okay, Chip, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, sir.
Okay. I'd like to speak while we got the governor getting queued up. I want to come back to you because we didn't touch on something you brought up, which was the Sadowski funds that did not get swept this year into the regular budget. As everybody remembers, Sadowski funds are all about affordable housing. Uh-oh, we have the governor's office mute. Their music on hold.
They're going to transfer him to another line.
All right, they're going to transfer him to another line. But Chip.
You guys hear me?
Yes. Is this Governor DeSantis?
We'll defer to him.
This is him.
Hey, thank you, Governor, for coming. This is Keith Koenig. I'm chair of the Broward Workshop. We appreciate you being back this year. You were with us in person last year. This is our annual State of the County, Broward County Forum. We're doing this virtually, and we appreciate you calling in. Obviously, you've been working 24/7. Plus, you got a brand new baby. Congratulations on new Mamie. How's mom and the baby doing?
They're doing wonderful, particularly under the circumstances. Thank you.
So I'm gonna let you tell us what you are. Give us an update of where you see COVID-19 in the state of Florida here on Friday, April 3rd.
Sure. So if you look at what we're dealing with, we have about close to 60% of the cases statewide in Florida or in Southeast Florida, Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade. Miami-Dade is far and away has the most cases now. I think they have between 30 and 35% of all the cases statewide. And so that's been an area, we've worked with obviously the counties for weeks now. Those of you down there, you guys in Southeast Florida have been living under, pretty robust measures. It's really upended society. And that's tough. And hopefully that some of that stuff will work. Once the president extended April 30th, I went ahead and extended what's going on in Dade and others, to the rest of the state. Now, fortunately, we do have cases in other parts of the state, but I just think that if you look at, how this virus came to the United States, obviously it's a foreign virus. You look at Southeast Florida, all the international travel into Miami International Airport, all the cruise ships, all the back and forth between South Florida and New York City, which is the epicenter of the outbreak in the world right now. That, and then the density of the population in Southeast Florida. So we knew at the beginning that Southeast Florida was going to be a place. The first test center that we launched was in Broward County in conjunction with Broward Memorial. I have the National Guard. They're very good at kind of setting these things up, drive-through testing. So they do 700-800 people a day in Broward. We've done a couple sites now in Miami-Dade. Just opened one last week in Palm Beach County, or maybe earlier this week. I lose track. Palm Beach County, and then probably going to do another one in southern Palm Beach County. And I really believe just, expanding testing as much as you can. One, it's good for people to know whether they have this or not, but two, it allows you to make intelligent decisions based on actual facts and not just based on fear or panic or somebody, creating scenarios. So it's helped inform us. I would say between Dade and Broward, the one thing we see in Broward pretty consistently is, if you test 100 people, 10 will come back positive. And we're only testing people with symptoms. And so it's not like we're testing random people. So these are, and mostly the older people with symptoms. But, Broward, you test 100, 10 will come back positive. You test 1,000, 100 will come back positive. It's been pretty consistent in terms of you've got about 10% that test positive, 90% negative. Dade, the rate of positive is higher. Not as high as like New York City. New York City's like 40% test positive, and probably more than that. I think they basically just stopped testing a lot of people in the city because the medical folks know the symptoms so much that if someone comes in, they know what they have to do. So we're going to probably we've done over 80,000 tests, mostly just in the last few weeks since we stood this stuff up. And we'll hopefully be over 100,000 soon. That will be about one test for every 200 Floridians, which is what South Korea did. And, South Korea was able to use robust testing to constantly try to get ahead of this thing. They didn't have a massive economic shutdown, but yet if you look at their numbers, they were very successful. So to me, I think continuing to expand testing is important for fighting it, containing it, but also for having a possibility of having a more normal society. One of the things we were out with at the very beginning was protecting the seniors, the nursing homes, and then urging people 65 and plus to stay home as much as possible, avoid crowds, avoid contact with folks. And the reason for that is if you look at the fatalities, this is probably true nationwide as well, but in Florida, people 65 and up represent about 25% of the documented infections. They represent 54% of the hospitalizations resulting from the infections, but then 86% of the fatalities. So if you look at this, those who are 65 and older, usually they have one or sometimes multiple underlying health conditions. They're the ones that are the most at risk from this virus. We do have people, fatalities for people under 65. Usually it is somebody with a really serious underlying medical condition. And that could be something like immune system deficiency, could be diabetes, could be heart conditions. There's a whole bunch of different things. And so, we're in this for another 30 days when the president extended it. I'm hoping that, we just continue working hard. We're working on these N95 masks, partially through Jared Moskowitz, a Broward guy running our emergency management. He really helped shame 3M into what they were doing with these masks. I mean, they would not sell masks directly to us. They'd go through their distributors, but what their distributors were doing was they could sell it for a huge markup and get cash to foreign countries because they're in such demand. So Florida's orders isn't being fulfilled. Other orders aren't being fulfilled. So the president invoked the Defense Production Act. I think that will mean that we're still going to pay market price for them. It isn't like we're not willing to pay. But hopefully some of those masks will be flowing to hospitals in the United States rather than to foreign countries. So really disappointing on how the 3M and their distributors acted with all this. The personal protective equipment, is one of the most important things we can do because that's what protects the healthcare workers who are on the front lines. We monitor every day kind of the bed capacity and what the hospital situation is looking like in the state of Florida. And fortunately for us, there have been a lot of great done by the hospitals to prepare for a potential surge. And I think as of right now, these are the most recent numbers I had. Statewide, the bed availability, 41% of the beds were available. Broward was about 42% of the beds were available. So that's really when they talk about flattening the curve. There's a recognition that, when you have a contagious respiratory disease, you're never going to be able to completely keep it in check. It will spread, but if it spreads at a slower rate, and infects people at a slower rate, then you have the medical system and the hospital system can cope with it. And so that's why some of the, whether it's washing hands frequently, whether it's social distance, whether it's some of the more extreme measures that have been put in, that's really the name of the game to make sure the hospital system can cope. We've assumed from the beginning that there could be a surge, particularly in Southeast Florida. So we have field hospitals set up in both Broward and Miami-Dade. We've also identified a number of other buildings. Some of them were hospitals that are no longer being used, where we can license and also have them used. And some of those other things may not be used for COVID patients. Maybe you have your normal patients for other things in some of the other facilities. And so those are things we've been working on really from the beginning and trying to make sure that if there's a surge that we're prepared for it. But I would just say for you guys, just as being leaders, just continue to stress to people just to take care of themselves. And what we're doing with our essential business order that I did the other day is all we're trying to do is limit people's close contacts outside their household. It doesn't mean that you can't leave your house, go for a run, do things like that, but it's all about reducing, minimizing, eliminating, if you can, close contacts with those who are outside the home. This is a disease that's going to spread when you're within close contact of somebody. In terms of the economic response and impact, if you look at what has happened in just 2 weeks, I don't think you could describe it as any other thing but absolutely catastrophic. To put it in perspective, in 2019, Florida's Department of Economic Opportunity received a total of 307,701 claims for unemployment insurance. In just the last 2 weeks, Department of Economic Opportunity received 348,511 claims for unemployment insurance. So 2 weeks, we scored past all of 2019. Obviously, people are inquiring about, getting relief. Since August of 2018 to February 2020, The contact center took a total of 2.39 million calls. Just this week, Department of Economic Opportunity has taken 2.1 million calls. So you're in a situation where you have an increase unlike anything we've ever seen, great recession, it doesn't matter. And those job losses are likely to continue mounting as long as we're in this shape. So us in Florida, as well as other states, have all been overwhelmed by the unemployment claims. And so what I'm doing is I issued an executive order. We've got tens of thousands of state employees who are either teleworking or just considered non-essential and have been told to stay home. So I've asked each agency to provide me manpower so that we can dramatically increase the capacity of the call center. So we're going to be having, each agency coughing up, hopefully hundreds of folks to be able to help with this. We've also been talking with some big private sector companies who have robust call centers but don't necessarily need to use them right now. So we could potentially be enlisting that. And obviously we can contract out some contract call centers as well. So we're looking to do all of those things as quickly as possible so that people can apply and we could get the money sent in their direction. But because we're having economic setbacks, I wanted to look and see what are the things we could do, at least on the government level, that would be stimulative to the economy. One of the things is some of our road projects. So I ordered the FDOT to accelerate some of the key projects around the state. We have traffic is so light now, that they can shut down more lanes. They can work, from sunrise to sunset, and really try to get a lot of this moving in the right direction so that when we're all back online, these projects will be closer to completion. So that's about a $2.1 billion move in a forward direction. And I think it's good for the state to have that anyways, but hopefully it'll be stimulative. And then the other thing, I think you guys talked to Senator Rubio, the small businesses, are getting absolutely whacked in that stimulus bill that they did. There's a very generous loan program, effectively a loan forgiveness program, where you'll be able to take out a loan from a private bank. Federal government backs it, and then I think the federal government will simply just forgive it. So that will be able to keep people solvent, hopefully for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then they can hopefully get back on their feet. So this is, this is where we find ourselves, and that's just it's unfortunate that we're here, but that's where we're at. I think you guys have been following this cruise ship. I think that there's a great plan in place. I think it's going to be fine. Obviously, going forward, after we bring these Americans in and the Floridians, there's going to be a limit to what we're going to be able to accommodate from just foreigners, on some of these other ships. Part of the reasons why I think you have, COVID in Broward is just simply because of the cruise ships. This is being brought to Florida and other places through airlines and through cruise ships. So it is what it is. And then I did do a notice or an executive order to forestall rent to forestall evictions and foreclosures. People still obviously are going to have to meet their obligations in due time, but we wanted to give them the opportunity to get on their feet with that. And final thing I would just say is, we're engaged in something the country's never been engaged in before. I mean, we've had other pandemics. The country's not fought that in this way, where you're basically shutting down the society and a lot of the economic engine. And I think the consequences of that are unknowable. But there will certainly be consequences to that. And so I think our job should be to try to mitigate as much of the damage as possible and try to get people back on their feet as soon as this passes. And so any ideas that any of you have about how we get back going economically, maybe it looks a little different. Maybe you got to do some things to keep people safe. We're not going to have a vaccine for this year. Now, hopefully, they're talking about it being more seasonal. Maybe that would give us some time before it resurges in the fall to have some good things in place. But I think we've got to be thinking about it because, some people say, well, we can't do anything until there's a vaccine. And that's untenable. There's no way that would be sustainable. I mean, I think a lot of people have cabin fever already. I think a lot of people are bursting at the seams. That is only going to increase the longer this goes. and the more economic devastation that ensues. So any help, any ideas, any help, we appreciate it. It's unfortunate that we're having to meet under these circumstances. I mean, last year, Broward was doing a lot of great things, and I think the year between then and now done even more great things economically. There was so much good stuff going on, and so this throws a wrench into that. But I just want to commend the folks down in Broward for really making the county an economic engine for the state of Florida. It will be again, but we got to get through this first.
Yeah, you're exactly right, Governor. We're proud of the economic engine that Broward County is. You brought up something about South Korea that I found a question I have very interesting. You say they didn't have a complete shutdown. Could you tell us some of the practices that they did? Because they're held up as one of the models to be able to emulate in terms of controlling COVID-19. What did South Korea do that we can learn from?
Yeah, and I don't know that they'd shut down at all, really. I mean, they certainly kept doing public transportation. Well, I mean, New York is still doing that too. So be wary of when you hear shutdown. They're still packed on the subway in New York City right now. But they went to work. They did all the restaurants. They still did all that. But what they did is they had robust testing in place, and so they were able to figure out where this thing was sprouting up, and then they aggressively would quarantine the sick, and then identify people they had been in contact with, isolate them, test them, and just continue to do that relentlessly. And that's really, with an infectious disease, that's the basic posture that you would take in one of these situations. And the problem that the U.S. ran into was, the CDC designed their own tests. They initially, like if you had come presented with COVID symptoms and say, late February, that you would have had your sample taken, and then it would have been sent to Atlanta at the CDC. It would have taken 5 to 7 days. Finally, they sent some of this to public health labs, but it was not nearly enough of what you needed. And so, we really don't have a good sense of what COVID was doing in Florida, or the country for that matter, at the end of February into March. And then now that we've ramped up testing, I've got a pretty good sense right now. So as we see trends moving from what our data is now, I think we'd be in a very good situation to understand that. But I think South Korea shows, they specifically did not do a lockdown model. They kept infections low. They were able to isolate and contain it, but they had the apparatus in place to be able to do it. They also do some things which, quite frankly, in the U.S. just might not fly. I mean, they would, use cell phone data. If someone was positive, they would try to trace where they had been and then go back and do a lot of that. So it's very intensive work. But I think it was obviously effective. And then, you look at like in Italy, Italy locked down, and they're still having problems. I mean, this thing is still spreading like wildfire. So I think that there's some lessons in some of that. The good thing about us, if we wanted to go to more model based on really serious testing and contact tracing, is you're starting to see new products come on the market every day. We've already distributed a 45-minute test to Broward Memorial. Abbott Labs is going to be distributing to Florida hospitals very soon. Hopefully, we think today or into next week, a 5-minute test that they can put through. So that's kind of like being tested for the flu. That allows you to do more things than what we're doing now. But I think the general gist would be, if you have an infectious disease, you have the infrastructure to be able to test it and isolate people. You would rather isolate the sick rather than suppress the entire society. That's what South Korea did, and that's what I think would be a model. The good thing about that model in terms of how COVID reacts is, this is not like the Spanish flu, where the Spanish flu would take out young children, it'd take out middle-aged, healthy people, and elderly. I mean, it was really indiscriminate. COVID, based on the numbers that I cited, I mean, we know who's at risk for COVID: elderly with underlying conditions, or really anyone with those underlying conditions. So I think there'd be ways with robust testing and then isolating those who are most at risk that you could get back to having a more, a more productive society. And that's important, not just for economic well-being, which, that's one thing, but really just for the social fabric. I mean, I worry about how that will fray over the next weeks and months if this continues.
Thank you. And talk about, it's discussed that the peak for us might be around May 3rd. What's the range that you're hearing that it could be earlier or later? And if it is, wherever it is, where do you see a loosening of the restrictions on businesses?
So look, I think there's a lot of different models out there. A lot of them, can conflict. I mean, the ones we looked at initially said that the peak would be sometime in April, early to mid-April. Now you have, so there always be, I mean, bottom line for us is we're just going to keep testing. Obviously, you have as many mitigation measures as could possibly be put in place are in place in every corner of the state, even in places, quite frankly, that probably don't need them. And so we're going to be able to just measure how these cases are evolving, the hospitalizations, and that's really what's going to tell us. If we see hospitalizations start to level off, that's going to be a good sign. The infections, when you're looking at that, keep in mind, like, different states are testing differently. So, for example, Michigan has more infections than we do, but we have about 5 times more negative test results than they do. So we're just testing a lot more. And so, consequently, when you test more, you're going to find more. Some of these others, I mean, California, they only have about 25,000 negative results. They got about 60,000 tests that are, quote, pending. Florida, our philosophy has been the more testing, the better. That means you're going to have identify more positive cases overall. But for me, I'm less concerned about that number than I am concerned about the number of within that end up hospitalized. Because if you don't end up hospitalized, you're going to recover. If you end up hospitalized, obviously that stresses the hospital system. But then if you end up hospitalized, and you're in one of those risk groups, you're at risk for fatality. So that's really, how we're looking at it. And so I think it'll just be, as we've done enough testing to kind of see where we're at. I think that we'll monitor who's going into the hospitals and identify the trends as they go. But I think a lot of this is unknowable. And plus, when you're doing a model, you got to make assumptions about how transferable this disease is. They call it R naught. And if a disease has an R naught of like 2 or 3, then that will replicate, throughout society. If it's below 2, it will expand, but it expands at kind of a pace that would be manageable. And if it's below 1, meaning the average person who gets it either won't pass, usually doesn't even pass it on to somebody, or the average would be less than 1 person, then it eventually dies out. So we really started in this country a real significant discussion about hygiene, about washing your hands, about avoiding crowds of people, about being careful, who you're around. And the effects of that are just simply unknowable in advance. But I can tell you, and you guys have your own experiences, but I mean, there's been a radical change in people's behavior. And I think that's the most important. I mean, saying that a business can't operate or this or that, that's not ultimately going to be what makes the difference. What's going to make the difference are individual choices and behaviors. And we're only going to see the effects of that, as the numbers start coming in. It's very difficult, I think, to predict.
Governor, we could not be more appreciative of you joining us. We are very grateful for your leadership. This is a challenging time, and we're delighted that we've got good leaders that are making the decisions for us. I think you've been right spot on at every step of the way. Thank you very much for joining us, and appreciate, I'm sure you're working hard today, and give our best to your Chief of Staff, Shane Strum, a Broward guy. We're proud of Shane.
We got a Broward Chief of Staff and an Emergency Management Director from Broward. So, and I think if you look, I mean, we've probably done more for Broward than anyone else. But that was because it was deserved, not because they were homers. But no, they're doing a great job, and I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks, Governor. Have a great day, and congratulations on the new baby. Give our best to Casey and your whole family.
Take care.
Well, we got Senator Rubio, federal. We got the governor on a state level. We're lucky to have Mark Wilson, the president of the Florida Chamber of Commerce, and also Dr. Jerry Parrish, their chief economist. We're going to cue them up. And Mark or Jerry, who's going to go first?
Mark is.
Okay, there you are, Mark. You're on. Welcome.
Great.
Welcome to Broward Workshops, virtual, state of the county. And thanks for joining us. Please give us your update.
Well, I will, Keith, and congratulations. It's just like you to keep business going on. So listen, I wish that the Florida Chamber could be there in person with the Broward Workshop. It's always a special invitation, and we greatly appreciate it. So Keith, again, I want to thank you for your leadership, and also Charlie Calkins as the chair of the Florida Chamber. We have literally been in ground zero on this, and we have a bit of a slide deck that we want to walk through this morning. As president of the Florida Chamber, I want to give a statewide perspective of what we're looking at, and then we're going to turn it over to our chief economist, Dr. Jerry Parrish. And so we do have some slides that we would like to put up, Corinne, if you could go ahead and do that. We've got, thank you again, Keith. First of all, look, we're flat out in unprecedented times here, and I'm so glad you had Senator Rubio and Governor DeSantis on the line. I'll tell you, there's a lot of misinformation out there right now. And being at ground zero on this, I can tell you, everyone on this webinar just experienced how in the know Governor DeSantis is. They're looking at what's worked in other countries, and they're looked at what's not worked in other countries and other cities. And every day we're making decisions in Florida that are in the best interest of keeping everyone safe and keeping everybody healthy. And so I'm so grateful that he was able to come on the line. He's very much the general right now for what our government in Florida is doing, just much the same way that the Florida Chamber is the general for the business community, trying to make sure that everybody has access to information. How do you keep your employees safe? And then eventually, how do we get this economy restarted again? And so 2 things I wanted to mention, Keith, right up front. First, we do a daily email to keep the entire business community in Florida updated on the latest COVID numbers, where to get small business loans, what's happening in Florida. And then also the governor yesterday put out a new executive order. I think he's done 18 executive orders so far. Yesterday there was an essential services order, and we're getting a lot of questions from businesses all over Florida about how it relates to their business. Anybody can go to floridachamber.com and sign up for the daily update, or find out what the executive order means to your business and to your industry. So next slide, Corinne. So a little bit of quick perspective here, and that is, if you think about it, 2 weeks ago, yesterday, was the last day of the legislative session. And so you heard the governor talk about how fast things have changed. And I simply wanted to give some quick perspective. Keith, you talked about, when will we, start going back to maybe getting our economy going again? Look, the trend is going to be later, not earlier. So no one really knows, but I just wanted to give some quick perspective on this. Think about it. 30 days ago, Florida was creating 1 out of every 10 new jobs in the United States. We had the 20th most diverse economy in the United States. We had about 285,000 jobs in Florida that were open, that were looking for people. And again, our economy, we've grown by the entire size of Mississippi's economy over the last 18 months. We're now the 17th largest economy in the world. But once we get through all this, we're still going to be very focused on becoming the 10th largest economy by 2030. So again, next slide, please. So again, we're very focused right now on the safety of our employees and the safety of all 22 million Floridians. But I did want to acknowledge our statewide chairman of the board of the Florida Chamber is your own Charlie Calkins. And he's been pretty outspoken lately. In fact, he was just in your paper there just the other day. And the reality of it is we need to kill this virus. That's job number 1. But in the background, we also need to understand that we can't kill our economy. And once this flatlines and once it moves past us, we're going to be uniting Florida's business community for an economic recovery package. And again, Charlie, I want to thank you for your leadership as well. Next slide, please. And then finally, I'm going to introduce our chief economist in just a minute. But what I want everyone to know is while the governor is helping to keep all of us safe, and while the Florida Chamber and all of you are trying to help our employees stay safe, in the background, we've been working on a massive economic recovery package for Florida, and we've put a strike force together, and we're using the best minds in the world. And so when it's safe to do so, we're going to be asking all of you to help us with the economic recovery in Florida. And again, it's all aimed at how do we, once this is behind us, become the 10th largest economy in the world. And so with that, we can go to the next slide. With that, what I want to do, Keith, is introduce our chief economist. And what I'm so happy to tell you about, we're the only chamber in America with a full-time chief economist. And every day we're getting access to not just the data, but the analysis of what do we as business leaders need to know about the health crisis that's led to a global economic recession. And what does it mean for us in Florida? And how can we begin to unite with the Broward Workshop and all of your teammates for the future? So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to my teammate, Dr. Jerry Parrish.
And thank you, Mark. And thank you, Jerry, for coming in. We start every Broward Workshop board meeting with Jerry's report card for the state of Florida that he also gives us the Broward report card. So we're very grateful for that. We've been getting good marks for the last couple of years. So thank you. Jerry?
Thanks, Keith, and welcome everyone. I want to talk about a couple things. I want to show you some maps and really talk about the suddenness of what's been going on. This Mark has already mentioned that, where we were 30 days ago. I want to walk you through a few of the recent days and what's been going on. What you've seen on the screen is something that we produce every day and send out to on our daily email. You can sign up at the floridachamber.com website and get this kind of information. So I encourage you to do that if you're not already doing it. But on the left, you see what was happening merely 2 weeks ago. Florida had 563 cases. Broward had 128 of those. 36 counties had cases. But look, just yesterday, last night, I did a new map to show where we are now. So we've gone in literally less than 2 weeks, because this is as of last night, to 9,000 cases. Broward has 1,481 of those. And you can see the testing numbers and the number of counties with cases and how it's grown. I think one of the things I really want to talk about is what the density is. And I say density is how many cases per people, or the way I like to show it is how many people per case. So if you got a low number, that means you don't have that many people per case. You have a more dense number of cases. So let's adjust these by population. So if you look at the next slide, there we go. What you see is people per case around the state, and it's a heat map. So the darker the area, that means the higher number of cases per population. And I've drawn a big circle around Broward there. Miami-Dade certainly is number one. The average for the state of Florida, you can see there, is 2,387 people per case right now, whereas Broward's a lot less than that. So in other words, you've got a higher density of cases. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody, but I'm not sure you're probably seeing that on a regular basis or seeing it adjusted by population. So, I think this is important because, you know where the cases are. I think the governor mentioned about 60% are in Southeast Florida. You see a lot of cases, Southeast Florida counties are in the top 10. I think, Lee County is probably one that's number 11 or a number 12 there. But that, I hope, gives you a sense of where the majority of cases are and what kind of thing that we're fighting here. If you go to the next slide, I wanted to show you what has happened over the past few weeks. Mark was talking about the last 30 days. Well, New York City is what I'm going to compare Broward to. Their first reported case that I could find in the press was March the 1st, whereas Broward had 2 cases indicated on March the 6th. So you can see the growth of these cases. You go from 10 to 610 in a week in New York, and 2 to 11. And so what you end up on March 27th, there were only 612 cases versus 25,000. You can see the growth pattern. The good news is there's not nearly as many cases in Broward as there is New York City. But there's some even better news, because I really want you to think about how many cases per population there. So if you'll see on the next slide, this is where we are right now. This is as of April, the latest data that I could get. New York City has a website where they show that. The state of Florida has a website on the Department of Health. I literally have to take these numbers and put them in a spreadsheet and make my own map as how these maps get done, and then adjust it by population. So what you can see is, once again, for Broward County, 1 out of every 1,300 people, give or take, have a case of COVID-19, a positive case that's been tested. Now, they could be in the hospital, they could be recovered by now, they could be sitting at home in quarantine. But look at the numbers there. I wanted to point that out. The cases in New York City are about 7.2 times as dense as they are in Broward County. Doesn't mean that they're not going to grow, because I will guarantee you the numbers are going to get bigger before they get smaller. But I did want you to see that, just to kind of give you a sense of where you are, because I know you're going to see a lot of news over the next couple of weeks, especially up in New York City. Now let's talk about the unemployment claims. If you look at the next slide, I took the middle of March for the last few years and showed unemployment claims. These are the initial claims when somebody gets laid off, their company closes, things happen, and they go to the unemployment office and they file a claim. Of course, they're doing it online now. But what you can see is, a few thousand in most weeks during the middle of March over the past several years. More than 74,000 last year, and you can see the number, or last week, and you can see the number that we just got on Thursday for this previous week. I run a model on the Florida Chamber Foundation's Florida Scorecard website, and that's what Keith Koenig was talking about. There's every state, data for the entire state and data for all the counties are on the Florida Scorecard. One of the things I have on there is the probability of recession. And one of the things that model looks for when it calculates the probability is the standard deviation move from the previous series. So over the past standard deviation over the past year, that would mean a change that you might expect was about 900 initial claims. Well, the first jump was more than 70 standard deviations. And then, of course, the next one was a couple of hundred standard deviations. That's why the model, if you look at it today, it's on the business climate and competitiveness pillar of the Florida Scorecard. You'll see that it lists the probability of Florida being in a recession at 100%. Now, where's the damage going to be in the economy? A lot of the models out there expect a really sharp drop in the second quarter. There's no way we're going to avoid that with all the things that are shut down here. I've seen a lot of estimates out there, and they're really frightening. They're nothing like we've ever seen before, especially with respect to the suddenness of it. So kind of as a proxy, what I've done, if you'll take a look at the next slide, is I've plotted out by the metropolitan statistical areas in the state of Florida. And I'm going to break it down one more time here in a second, but look at the probability, or what the percent of private sector jobs that are leisure and hospitality jobs. Certainly that industry is going to take the biggest hit. Retail is going to follow it. We're even losing jobs in manufacturing because of supply chain issues. But you can see your percentage. Florida is 16% in this metric versus the U.S. average is 13.3. Not as high as what people think. Florida, some people guess that we're 20 or 30 or 40% of our jobs are leisure and hospitality. But let's take a look at the next slide, and this is the last one I have here. This breaks that same other way. It breaks it down by county. There we go. Thank you very much. Well, and you can see your county is exactly the U.S. average. So I'm not going to say that the economy is not going to get hurt in Broward County, because it certainly is. That's why we're working on the plan that Mark Wilson talked about with McKinsey, and I'm talking to economists every day. We're really trying to get a handle on this. Certainly we'll report out some findings as soon as we have them. But you got to remember, this is unprecedented. It's very difficult to model. However, what I think in Broward County, certainly you're going to get hurt about the U.S. average is a good guess right now. but we'll have more data to come. That's what I wanted to show you today. Thank you, Keith. Appreciate the invitation to be here.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I would have guessed that Broward would be a higher. So if we're kind of mirroring the national average, it's very insightful information. Jerry and Mark, thank you very much for joining us today. Thanks for being with us virtually. And Jerry, you've been to several of our forums, and you were planned to be physically here. Mark, you and Jerry are always invited. We love getting your input. Thanks for the great leadership, and you guys have a great day. And let's bring back Florida very strong. Next is coming up is going to be our Broward County Mayor, Dale Holdis. Dale,
Good morning.
I promised everybody that I would be the time police, and unfortunately, the governor and Senator Rubio both ran a little longer than I expected. So I couldn't cut them off, and I'm not going to cut you off either, but I appreciate your overview of what's going on in Broward County.
Thank you very much, Keith, and thank you for your leadership, and thanks to the workshop for the great work you do in Broward County. I'd like to extend my gratitude on behalf of the people of Broward County to Governor DeSantis and his team, particularly Shane Strom and Jared Moskowitz, two of our own from Broward County. We've created a partnership and working very well together. I want to thank them especially for sending us those additional test kits to Broward Health to reopen that North testing site and to look to put one in central Broward County that many of the residents have asked for. To Senator Rubio, thanks for passing the CARES Act. We're going to rely on that tremendously to help us through these tough times. And of course, my good friend Chip, you're representing us well in Tallahassee. I missed the Chip and Dale show, so we'll make up for that in time. We are being hit hard, as everyone knows, and our airport, our passenger load is only at 10%. We are having about 80 commercial flights per day. Normally that would be 425. We've closed Concourse A, so that's vacant now, and we're closing other sites also. We have about 15 concessionaires operating, and their business is down almost 90% also. On the international side, it's pretty much flat, almost down to nothing, except for folks repatriating back to our homeland. So, our parking garage is less than 4% occupancy. It's really devastating there for the employees at the airport. We're working with them through our human service program to see how we can assist them through these tough times. We're looking at the CARES Act to see how we can mitigate the damage with the support of the federal government on not only just the employees, but also the businesses, because the businesses are the employers of these employees. On the port side, we're grateful that we have quite a bit of diversity there, and that we have crude, we have oil, petroleum coming in, cruise ships, of course, you know that's pretty much closed, but we also have cargo, and those cargo is still functioning quite well because we have to still fill the grocery stores and supply us with what we need, and a lot of those products come out of Port Everglades. And the big topic, the cruise line that we were able to work to ensure that fellow Americans who needed to come home came home. We negotiated a long period of time. It was intense. It was gut-wrenching at times, because one of the things we didn't want to do was further endanger the people of Broward County with the spread of COVID-19. So the agreement we came to did just that. We were able to get almost 1,200 passengers directly from the port, and it starts in a short time. The flights are already, the aircraft's already on the ground at the port. And I want to thank Mark Gale and for helping us ensure that we facilitate that. We have charter flights at the airport now. The passengers on the cruise ship will be bused directly from the port onto the tarmac. So they won't intermingle with the regular population here in Broward County. There's almost 1,200. We have a few, sadly, that are gonna be in the hospital, about 13. And there's about 26 passengers that will remain on board until they recover because they're still showing symptoms. And by then they will be able to take off. In this partnership, the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the Florida Department of Health in Broward County, U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, the Sheriff's Office, the Port Everglades Pilots Association, and our port management team work very closely to ensure we had an agreement that worked for people in Broward County. We came to an agreement. It was the right thing, I believe, to do, though tough, for us to move forward with that.
Well, Mayor, thank you very much. That's those are the right leadership that we had. Anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, so our bus system's still functioning on Saturday schedule. It's a small amount of ridership there, but people still have to move. Many of our healthcare workers utilize that to get to work. And we've beefed up our human services department because we're facing a human tragedy here from a health standpoint, but also from an economic standpoint. So we're ensuring that our nonprofit organizations remain whole and looking to see how we can put more funding and support there to help the people as we work through this crisis. In terms of reserve, Broward County, as many of you may know, has one of the best bond rating because we're fiscally conservative in our approach. We have reserves in every account that we can think of. We are going to have a meeting on Tuesday where we adjust our budget, which is something we do on an annual basis. We're moving $4 million over just for COVID. We're beefing up our reserves everywhere we can. We, on our transportation tax that many of you helped so hard to pass, we have extra funds that came into that, and we're going to put some in reserve. But as we go forward, we have a lot of projects that were on the way. The airport expansion, we're in a $3.6 billion airport expansion. That work continues. Port Everglades, we were at $3.2 billion expansion. The convention center and hotel, that was over $1 billion. Work still continues on that. I believe that we're gonna weather this storm quite well. Part of what the county administrator and I have spoken about is how we try as much as we can to front load these projects that we have that are on the way. We are also planning that joint joint civic center with Fort Lauderdale to have our joint offices there, which I think is a good thing for us to work together. So as we move forward, as much of the projects that we have, can we front load them so that as we get beyond this crisis, we can put our people back to work. That is really the important thing. And as many of you know, before this, our employment rate was one of the lowest in the country. We will get back there as long as we work together, and we're working together quite well.
Mayor Holness, thank you very much for that leadership. Thank you for the update. I appreciate particularly understanding around the cruise ship disembarkation. That was very good stuff. Next on tap, Superintendent Bob Runcie, my good friend, a guy that we really respect and appreciate the great work he's doing. Bob, unfortunately, we're on the time crunch, so if you can give us a quick overview of what's happening at county schools.
Thank you so much, Keith, and I appreciate the continued support of public education from the workshop. We focus on 3 specific areas as we've tried to ensure learning continuity in the district. First, food insecurity. About 60% of our students attending Broward County schools are impacted by poverty and food insecurity, which qualifies them for free and reduced meals. So our big priority when we go through a situation like this is to ensure that we can continue to feed our children and families. So starting this Monday, we opened 47 feeding sites across Broward County where families could pick up meals to go safely, no questions asked. So far, during the first 4 days of this week, we've served over 50,000 meals already. Our second focus area has been to try to close the digital divide. More than 10% of students nationally don't have digital devices. We believe that's pretty similar to where we are in Broward County. So we have to make sure that all of our kids had a digital device to be able to continue learning. So over the course of about 8 days, we distributed more than 82,000 laptop computers to any student who didn't have one. A lot of this was made possible through the taxpayers of Broward County, as you know, with your support as well. We passed the Smart Bond referendum in 2014, and that allowed us to purchase over 95,000 additional computing devices. All this put us in a very good position to successfully carry out distance learning this week with approximately 15,000 teachers and over 220,000 students in our district managed schools participated in remote learning. So distance learning in Broward County is not something that's new. Over the past several years, we've been developing our capability to deliver personalized education and instruction with a blend of classroom time with teachers and online digital resources that are available anytime and any place. We've invested in this system called Canvas, our Canvas learning management system. It allows us to provide digital versions of textbooks, links to educational programs and resources, lesson plans, instructional materials for every grade level and subject, including our special needs students and bilingual. We're also going to use that platform to deliver social and emotional learning and mental health services where we connect our school counselors, psychologists, social workers, and other mental health professionals with students who need their support. And just to give you a sense of where we are with our distance learning platform in Broward County relative to the rest of the state and the county, I'll share an email message I just got from a teacher this week. And she said this: I've been observing my colleagues in other districts and other states. I feel grateful that our district is prepared technologically. We've had access to Canvas and Canvas training for a few years. We were just told that the system is automatically taking attendance for us. The assignments I input can automatically sync to Pinnacle, where parents and families can see the grades. I wish that our story was being told more, that our school district is continuing in a unified way on a platform that many students are already familiar with, that we seem to be doing better compared to other teachers in other states and districts who were just given a list of approved vendors and cobbled together solutions and told to get online as soon as possible, or schools that just stopped teaching. So that quote is an example, give you a sense of where we are. We certainly know that there's going to be challenges and mistakes that we'll make along the way, but my promise to our community is that we'll fix them, we'll find solutions, and we'll continue to move forward as we always have. That's what we're here for, and we know that our children deserve nothing less. I always tell my leadership team, leadership is not what we do when times are good, but has everything to do with us standing strong in the face of challenges and crisis. I've been here with you in Broward County through trying times, and I'm going to be here with you through this crisis. I encourage all of you to make the best of this moment and to take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Thank you so much.
Oh, that was awesome. That's awesome. Great update. Much appreciated. Thanks for the leadership. Another great leader we have managing our whole Convention and Visitors Bureau, Stacy Ritter. Stacy, thanks for being patient. We're, as you know, on a little bit of a time crunch, but give us an update what's going on in your world.
Sure. Thanks, Keith. And thank you for having me this morning. I can promise you that we are contributing our sales tax to wine as well in our household, as you well know.
I know Russ is doing his share.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. First of all, I want to give a quick thank you to the Broward County employees who continue to work every single day. Many of us are still going to work at our offices every single day. And while we also have to thank the Publix and CVS workers, Broward County is still operating. So thanks to those people who do it every day. So here's a quick update. I say that I used to sell sunshine and happiness, and now I've become the queen of doom. So here we go. In Broward County, for the week of March 22nd to March 28th, occupancy was down 24%. The occupancy was down to 24%, which is a decline of 72% over the same week last year. The downtown beach submarket posted a 14% occupancy, which is a decline of 84% over the same time last year. The Hollywood Airport submarket has had the highest occupancy at 32%, and that's likely because of the airline crews and the healthcare workers surrounding the Miramar Center for drive-through testing. We have watched occupancy decline over the past 3 weeks. This last week, week 4, it was pretty level across the week. We have 100 hotels that have temporarily suspended operations. Clearly, that's probably going to get worse before it gets better, although we also have over 100 hotels who have signed up to overnight essential workers. ADR was down 39%, RevPAR was down 83%, reported hotel revenue was down 82.5% over the same week last year. Week 3 in March, the decline was 64%. All of our neighboring competitive markets have posted declines as well, but of all of them, GFL has posted the highest occupancy. So to put it in perspective, looking at March 1st, which was the beginning of the downturn, to March 28th, which is the latest data available, occupancy is down 39% over the same time last year. Overnight hotel stays is down 37%, ADR is down 18%, and RevPAR is down 46%. Hotel revenue is reportedly down 45%. Industry experts originally estimated that this would be 6 times worse than 9/11. That has now been revised to 7 times worse than 9/11 from an economic standpoint. We continue to push out our messages to industry partners. We're holding up our marketing. We don't want to be tone deaf in this very, very critical time. We have a website for industry partners where we're posting all sorts of relevant information related to COVID and which hotels are operating, which are not. We have virtual experiences posted on our website with tours for places like the NSU Art Museum, Bonnet House, Stranahan House. We have articles featuring restaurants which are offering curbside delivery and takeout, ways locals can help the tourism industry, like the Hands for Hospitality initiative. We have a list of movies and TVs that were shot in or are about Greater Fort Lauderdale for people to enjoy at home, a collection of recipes from local chefs. We're also starting a new campaign, which we are calling Local Heroes. We're launching an initiative to recognize those people in Broward County who are going above and beyond in this very critical time. So we continue to do what we have to do. We think it's very important to convince our international and domestic visitors when this is all said and done that we are a very welcoming place to come. And that's how we are doing business right now.
Thanks, Stacy. I can promise you one thing. My wife, Kelly, and I, as soon as the first restaurant opens, we will be there. And I have a feeling the restaurants are going to be slammed to start with because cabin fever. I mean, we're only a week into this and we've got cabin fever.
Absolutely. 2 things.
Stuff.
Yeah, restaurants and toes in the sand. I think a lot of us want to put our toes in the sand again.
Yeah, and in the water too. Thank you, Stacy. Sheriff Gregory Tony. Sheriff Tony, tell us what's going on in Broward County from your point of view and what we need to be focused on.
Sure. Good morning, Keith. Good morning, everyone on. First of all, thanks for the opportunity to come in and speak. You know, over the last few days, it's been a lot of different executive orders and administrative orders that's been posted by both the governor and our county administrator, and some uncertainty has come into it. How is the agency going to enforce these particular orders when it impacts our business community and our residents? And we have taken an educational approach in that we are not looking at necessarily the letter of the law in this one, but more so what the intent is. And it has been the governor's intent as well as our county administrator to provide a public safety platform to keep people off these streets, but not to criminalize our businesses. And so what our efforts have been is to ensure all our deputies across the entire county, including our municipal partners, as I've had multiple conversations with every chief of police in this county, and that we educate, we warn, but this is not something where we will get into having to make physical arrests, because that is not the intent behind this. There's been, of course, a lot of concerns as to whether or not we will be able to perform and meet the needs of the public community, and we are there. We are fine. We have not missed a beat in any form of our services. We continue to procure any type of personal protective equipment that is essential for our deputies and our fire rescue services to be able to perform their duties. To give you an idea of where we are at with our personal protection equipment, we've already ordered $1.3 million of equipment, and we'll continue to fight that head on and not become complacent. I think the governor had outlined very clearly about some of the complications we were having, not only with 3M, but with multiple distributors across the country, if not this world, and that some of them have chosen to go against decency, in my opinion, and focus financially on what they can benefit and gain for themselves. This particular virus is impacting our organization. I currently have roughly 15 employees who have tested positive. That goes across every section from law enforcement, fire rescue, and my civilian population and employees. Currently in our jails, we've had been able to do a very good job in terms of containment and making sure this does not break out As of now, we had 2 inmates who had tested positive for the coronavirus. These were at 2 separate different locations, one at our main jail and the other one at our North Broward location. We currently have containment teams and decontamination elements occurring. And we've also seen something that's somewhat of the silver lining. We've seen a reduction in overall arrests. We are down on Part 1 crimes, which is misdemeanors, by a 31% decrease. We also noticed that the overall calls for service is down by 23%, which tells me that people are actually paying attention to the severity of this virus. I can tell you I'm in full operation mode. I have been on multiple patrols throughout this entire county. People are complying with the restrictions on the beaches. Our business owners are complying with the restrictions in terms of being clear that they fall under those essential categories. And then I will also share this. The mayor briefly gave you a highlight reel about what's going on the porch. And I apologize, you can't see me because I am literally watching this operation take place. We worked very diligently for the last 2.5 weeks as we knew this ship had the potential to come here. And I say we, our unified command that I put together down at the porch, consisting of the Coast Guard Command, our port director, and many others, to make sure we could present a comprehensive plan that would mitigate any undue risk that would take place to our community, but at the same time, not compromise the integrity of this country. We have a long-standing history to never leave anyone behind. That's not just a military creed. It's not just a first responder creed. That is the backbone of which this country has been built and which makes us unique. And so as we take on these challenges, I would encourage everyone to remember that we must be a country of conscience. And it may be okay for others to turn people away, but we have never done that in United States history. And so this was not going to fall on our watch. We were not going to be the first. And I was happy to see that we were able to present a plan to our county commissioners and the mayor that they agreed with, and we are currently operating, and we will get this done within the next 2 days. I've assigned our QRF, our Quick Response Force, which is the best of this agency. And we currently have our Marine Patrol, Aviation, Motors, combined, roughly 150 deputies and fire rescue personnel are conducting this operation. So if there's any concern as to whether or not we are going to be able to do our very best to minimize any harm, you can debunk that today. We will carry on. We will continue to fight and lead up in this community. I would say this, with the numbers we currently have in terms of my employees contracting this virus, we anticipate that we're going to see an increase in that number. It is just the nature of the risk of what we do because we're on the front line of this thing. But our men, our women, the morale is high. No one is skipping a beat in their performances, and you can continue to expect that out of this agency. Thank you.
Sheriff Tony, that's awesome, and thanks for the comprehensive report about how you're handling that that situation at the port. And thank you for your personal leadership. And I am proud to say I'm an American because what you said is accurate. We will take on the challenges and we will be humanitarian at every step of the way. Thank you for your leadership and for being with us today. Now I'm going to switch the order a little bit. I'm going to go to Aurelio if Aurelio, if you're available. To give us an update on the healthcare system. We're going to be a few minutes past our 9 o'clock, obviously, but after Aurelio, we just have Charlie going to wrap it up for a couple of minutes, and we'll be done. I've found this very productive, and I'm super proud of our leadership, state, federal, and local. Aurelio?
Yeah, thank you, Keith. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, so listen, we in Broward County should be very proud. The governor identified Broward County as the first site to do a drive-through testing. I want to share the story that I got a call on Sunday afternoon. By 5 o'clock, he made the announcement that Broward County was going to be the first site. By Tuesday, we had the National Guard down here. By Wednesday, we had the site ready for patients. He came down on Thursday. Up to date, we have seen over 7,200 individuals being tested in that site, of which 7% are turning out positive. I can tell you that the healthcare system here in Broward County has come together. We have conversations with the Surgeon General, the Secretary of the Agency for Healthcare Administration, ACA, first on a daily basis. Now it's every other day. Hospitals within ourselves are talking with each other as to identifying bed capacity, ventilator capacity, how many patients in ICU, how many are on vents. Right now, we have bed capacity. As of yesterday, there were 2,700 available beds. But I think what everyone needs to keep in mind is that the surge is coming. And our models show that in about 10 to 14 days, there's going to be a spike. And that's what we all need to be cognizant of. The main issue here is our frontline workers, the nurses, the physicians, the personnel that work in hospitals and other areas in healthcare have the protective gear, the PPEs as they're called, to be able to deliver healthcare without being infected. I want to share that we have set up tents in every one of our hospitals and to triage patients before going into the hospital. And in 1 month that we passed those tents at regional hospital, by having protective personal equipment, we have not had one employee infected because patients coming in and you do not know. So the PPEs that are provided to the employees is our foremost of importance for all the providers. And I'm speaking on behalf of the healthcare industry here. And being the president of the Florida Hospital Association this year, I can tell you that our communications with the safety net, with the Florida Hospital Association, everyone is on the same page. Everyone is struggling to make sure that there's adequate supplies to protect our employees. First responders, as you heard Sheriff Tony, he placed an order to make sure that his staff is properly protected. But right now, there's capacity in the system. What we need to be concerned about, what's going to happen in 10 and 14 days from now when this pandemic surges, and then having to be able to care for all these patients. As far as, for example, we have 152 COVID-19 patients in our facilities, of which 36 are in ICU, and out of those 36, 28 are in ventilators. All of our hospitals have requested, not only at Memorial, but throughout South Florida, additional ventilators to make sure we're equipped for the surge. Broward County sits about 1.1% of deaths because of the virus compared to 1.6%. I don't know if that's any meaning of the work that is being done, but I can tell you that in communications on a daily basis with our colleagues at Broward Health, at Jackson, and Memorial, and others, we are taking the necessary steps to maintain this virus under control.
Hey, thanks for the update. So you think the spike is going to be in about 2 weeks?
That's what the models indicate to us. Now, it will not be as radical as we saw in New York because we're more spread and we were more proactive, I believe, in Broward County than in New York. But the density of the population in New York is what caused that spike. And then the transportation of everybody being in subways and on top of each other. We don't have that type of environment here in Broward County, but our model shows that between 10 and 14 days, this surge will spike.
And that spike will last how long? Will it be a short peak and then start to decline?
If we use Italy as a model, it's about 2 weeks after the spike, you start seeing a decline, but it's going to be gradual. Okay, because the length of stay in each one of these patients varies. If you're in a ventilator, you could be there for 10 days. If you're not, it could be 5 or 6 days. So it varies. But once it spikes, you got another 2 weeks for that curve to start declining.
Aurelio, thank you very much for your leadership and thank you for the good update. And please pass on every one of our appreciation to the frontline workers at Memorial and really everybody who is in the healthcare industry right now. It's really fascinating how the heroes in our country change, and now it's healthcare workers and even stockmen and people who are doing basic jobs that are really the heroes of this current situation. So thanks for the leadership. We're going to wrap it up with our own. We're going to wrap it up with our own Charlie Calkins. Charlie, you're the last one between us and the coffee bar. So what can you add on the people side, the employment law side, and also from your perch as the president, as the board chair of the Florida Chamber of Commerce?
Thank you, Keith. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We got you.
Got it. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to add thing, the scorecard that Mark and Jerry mentioned. It was thanks to the Huizinga family for funding that great program that we use to take a look at our statistics in Florida. The starting point to understand the federal legislation that has come about is that the government wants employment to continue and expand. So that's how you can understand the two big bills that have passed that have been referred to by our speakers. The first one is called the Families First Response Act. There's two components of that. If you have employees, if you're under 500 employees, there's emergency paid sick leave with 6 different criteria that you've got to pay attention to. You could end up having to pay 80 hours of pay if they qualify. There's 6 different qualifications. That payment is dollar for dollar deducted from your quarterly taxes, your payroll taxes. So it's just a cash flow issue, and it's something good to do for employees if they trigger one of those 6 categories. You do have to document what those are so the IRS will accept your deductions. The second part of that law was the Extended Emergency FMLA. That involves employees who have children and they are not in school, so they've got to take care of them. And that will trigger an FMLA extension up to 12 weeks with pay. Again, dollar for dollar deduction. You've got to document that. The second, and by the way, that first bill was signed into law 2 weeks ago. A week ago, the president signed into law the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security
Charlie, it's easy
Act.
for me to say.
Has been referred to as the CARES legislation, which you've all heard 1 week ago, and the federal government is off and running, like Senator Rubio pointed out. Unbelievable action by the feds, rules, FAQs, regulations. Very, very impressive, I think. But it is a fluid situation to know exactly what the government is doing and changing almost literally every day. So you got to stay on top of it. There's 5 employment-related sections of that law. One is called the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP. This is a critical one that starts today. This is the loan program. The idea, again, is to continue your payroll of your employees. If you'll do that, the SBA will give you a loan in terms I don't think anybody's ever seen before. 4% or less, no personal guarantees. Payout can be structured over 10 years. So it's an unbelievable program. And if you have less than 500 employees, you should be on it now because, like I said, today they're opening up the gate and money is supposed to start flowing. The president has said he wants that money flowing today. I don't know if that's going to be possible or not, but get on it if you're not. The CARES law also has a delay in payment of your payroll taxes. For the rest of this year, you can delay payment of your payroll taxes to 2021 and 2022. So you should be talking with your accountants about how to structure your system. If you're on payroll service, they should know how to do this, but pay attention to that because it'll allow you to have more money in your pocket to pay employees. That's the whole idea again. Unemployment, there's a $600 supplement. So if you do have employees that are unfortunately unemployed, the feds are adding $600 to the $257 per week amount that's paid for unemployment. The governor is really on this, trying to get the agency more robust. It is some glitches. It's going to be some problems, but let's give the governor and the agency time to get all this straightened out with the unparalleled number of claims being made. That's understandable. We just got to have some patience. The check should be rolling. There's also $1,200 checks that are going to go out to a lot of Americans as part of that bill. I've gotten lots of questions. My law firm has. I'll just go through a few of them. I know we're short on time. One, what's the difference between a layoff and a furlough? Nothing really, except companies are using the word furlough as a way to try to keep employees engaged with the company, maybe allowing them to be out on leave with continue their medical insurance, things like that. Structure your program so that you can have an employee base that'll be coming back to you as soon as you can get opened up, which is one of the things the Florida Chamber really is getting focused on. Can we do pay cuts? Absolutely. You can share the pain. You just got to be careful when you're doing pay cuts. If you have exempt employees that are salaried, you got to be very careful how you reduce that salary. Telework is absolutely something we're all doing this morning. and it's something your business can do. You should have guidelines, because remember, if they're teleworking for you, their place of telework where they're sitting is your business. So we recommend having the guidelines for teleworkers, including security of your electronic system. If you have employees who are refusing to work and you need them to work, like at Publix and places like that, in the hospitals, there are ways you can require employees to work in those situations. But obviously most employers, all employers, are being careful about that, because we do have a very serious situation, and people that have medical challenges, no one wants them exposed and to get sick. Can you ask about a medical condition? Yes, you can. Somebody comes in and you can take their temperature, you can ask questions, and you can keep them from coming into your workplace if they are possibly sick. There are ways that could trigger one of the laws that you'd have to pay them, or ultimately they could go to unemployment. So that kind of wraps it up. We have a website on my law firm, fisherphillips.com. The first page has free forms, advice, things like that. If you need that, go on that. I want to also just mention, I agree with Keith. I can't wait to get in the restaurants and get a bottle of wine with everybody. President Trump, yesterday, I heard him say that he's changed the IRS law so that going forward, 100% of any business meal, business entertainment will be deductible. And that got changed years ago, and he's now put that back on the books. So it's going to help encourage people to go to these restaurants just as soon as we can get them opened up. Thank you, Keith.
Charlie, thank you for that update. Any other attorneys that want to get there, we're going to give you a link to Charlie's website, but any of our other attorneys at Broward Workshop that would like to get theirs included there. I know a number of our firms are doing employment law, and this is a time when we all want to be sure that we're paying attention to the opportunities and the challenges that we face. So thanks, everybody. This 12th annual Broward Workshop State of Broward County Forum, coming virtually from our technology headquarters. I want to thank Jose Pataya, CEO Baxter Martin, for producing this webinar. I want to thank everybody who participated. Just as an FYI, everybody knows I like to keep the meetings on time. Governor DeSantis was a last-minute addition. He was not planned on our agenda, but we were able to get him in there, and it's kind of hard to say no to the governor when he wants to speak to us, and we were delighted he did. So I hope everybody found this very beneficial. I think this might have been the most timely time for us to have this, so it just worked out really well. Okay, everybody be safe. Broward Workshop signing off. Keith Koenig here, proud to be the chair, proud of the work that Broward Workshop does, proud of Corrine and Martha and Gaynell. They do a great job for us. Everybody be safe, stay hunkered down, but you know, there's a lot of us businesses that are available online. Okay, God bless. Bye.